So David, could we hear from you?
I hope so. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. We can see you too.
So my story was in Libya. I likewise sort of stumbled into it. There were rumors of Russian involvement in Libya, more than a year ago. And the U.S. State Department was playing it down too. The American officials were all saying, oh, we know the Russians. They like, General Haftar, one of the factions fighting in Libya, and they try to help him, but it's not a big deal. They're just making trouble on the cheap. But I said to them, I really want to know what's going on here. This seems like a bigger deal. And what's more, it's a twofer because the conflict in Libya has also become the first international conflict fought primarily with drones. Right, the two sides of the conflict, one with drones from China, the other with drones from Turkey, were really battling it out in the air. So if this Russian thing doesn't pan out, we've got a perfectly good drone war. So it turned out that both were quite interesting to me. I had a chance to talk to the soldiers about what it's like to engage in a combat that is really dominated by drones, about how it's sensitive, that each drone can only fire so many missiles and then has to go back, that the enemy can only run 3 drones at a time. So when the 3 drones each launch their 8 missiles, you've got another hour before they roll back again for the next round of bombs. Anyway, all that was very interesting. But the Russians were more interesting. The trick when I got there was to get close to the front. Libya is dangerous always. It's dangerous even to sit in your hotel for fear of kidnapping. And I prefer to travel without a big burly, former military looking security guard because that's quite conspicuous. So I kind of kept light on my feet and tried not to get too much notice. The breakthrough for me was getting up to the front line and visiting a field hospital there. I managed to show up at a lull in the fighting, and they spoke very vividly. The doctors there spoke very vividly about the quality of the wounds they were seeing from the Russian forces, that the Russians had sent snipers. The snipers were using hollow point bullets, which the Libyans had been unfamiliar with. And whereas most Libyan fighters are really kind of amateurish, picture mixed matched fatigues and flip-flops basically with an AK. These guys didn't miss, right? They were soldiers dropping dead from the first shot to the head or the chest, and the bullet didn't leave the body because it was one of these hollow points. And they were terrified. The Libyan soldiers who found themselves facing Russian mercenaries had never met anything like that. And they were in fairly rapid retreat. The Russians at that time appear to have sent in only a couple of hundred mercenaries, but because of the amateurishness of the Libyan forces, they were really pushing back the frontiers very steadily. It emerged also that they had sent refurbished old Sukhoi airplanes, more sophisticated artillery. They had spotters in there working to operate their higher quality artillery. All of this was just devastating and was really tilting what had been a stalemate in the Libyan civil war in terms of the Russians' preferred side. It also became clear that they weren't going to leave, that by sending these 200, 300, maybe 400 mercenaries, the Russians had established for themselves a permanent position as a spoiler. They were going to have a decisive say in whatever the outcome of the Libyan conflict. And this, after all, was a conflict precipitated in part by the American support for the uprising in 2011. So the United States had gone in, been greeted as liberators, invested a lot of money, and then seen all this taken from them and now set to be largely determined by the Russians. So that was all very interesting and set me on the trail of a couple other stories I did after that, looking at what the U.S. role had been in backing this conflict the Russians had then intervened to exploit, and also what was going on under the rule of their preferred client, General Khalifa Haftar, in the eastern part of the country. The challenge in writing it, of course, is Libya is just a heck of a complicated situation. And so weaving in the kind of geopolitics and the who's backing which side and why with the more vivid details about the nature of the sniper's weapons was a real writing challenge.
Well, I think it worked very well. And one of the points you just made, which really jumped out for me as a reader, was this contrast between this ragged army on the ground and this very sophisticated war in the air. I mean, it's something I just never thought of. It makes absolute sense in terms of drones, but that was I thought, a great contrast that made you understand why this is a different kind of war than most of us think wars are about. So I thought that was a very effective way to do that.